our freedom from oppression, 'cause that's what my people need. So when you hear me, Malanga ke ai, Akwane, Malanga ke ai, I said it soon come now. How much longer must we keep on talking? A million miles already, and we still go walking. All my life I get taught about the right of the great right way.
My dad, our dad, was a hard worker and an honest worker. And when he retired out of the bush, and he loved the bush with a passion. It was a good place for us. It was our food market, because we were brought up in pigeons and wild pork and deer. And if Dad wasn't in the bush, he was in the sea. And we were brought up on fish and kinders and crayfish. Not that I could eat them, but every boo-boos, mussels, pippies, fish heads. That was our diet. And but for Dad, when he retired and worked in the freezing works, he missed the bush. And sometimes he would talk about the bush and say, if he knew what he knew when he was working the bush, what he knew after he retired, he wished he could put all those trees back. And because he knew that all of those trees that he felled, native trees, great trees, that he felled, native bush that he felled, he knew that he made a lot of money for his bosses and for other people and never benefited out of it. So hence why when Dad took a house and moved us into it and made it his and told his boss, as far as our father was concerned, he was just in doing what he did. And he knows he made his work, his ability of working in the bush, he made a lot of money for Port Craig Timber Company. And our boss that took us from the East Coast down to the South Island, Jim Nesbitt, made a lot of money for them. So were we well looked after? Did my mother and father come out of it financially great? No. But were we well looked after? Yes, because the environment looked after us. My dad, our dad, was a hard worker and an honest worker. And when he retired out of the bush, and he loved the bush with a passion. It was a good place for us. It was our food market, because we were brought up in pigeons and wild pork and deer. And if Dad wasn't in the bush, he was in the sea. And we were brought up on fish and kinders and crayfish. Not that I could eat them, but every boo-boos, mussels, pippies, fish heads. That was our diet. And but for Dad, when he retired and worked in the freezing works, he missed the bush. And sometimes he would talk about the bush and say, if he knew what he knew when he was working the bush, what he knew after he retired, he wished he could put all those trees back. And because he knew that all of those trees that he felled, native trees, great trees, that he felled, native bush that he felled, he knew that he made a lot of money for his bosses and for other people and never benefited out of it. So hence why when Dad took a house and moved us into it and made it his and told his boss, as far as our father was concerned, he was just in doing what he did. And he knows he made his work, his ability of working in the bush, he made a lot of money for Port Craig Timber Company. And our boss that took us from the East Coast down to the South Island, Jim Nesbitt, made a lot of money for them. So were we well looked after? Did my mother and father come out of it financially great? No. No. But were we well looked after? Yes, because the environment looked after us.
During this interview, I identified two vital relationships that my granddad experienced while securing his whānau ownership of their first and only home. Firstly, the relationship he had with his bosses while he was a native bushworker for over 30 years. Secondly, the relationship he had to the ngahere, Tangaroa and Te Ao Māori. The way the economy was back at that time, along with the influence of the dominant Tauiwi community that was Tahakopa, resulted in my granddad assimilating to their worldviews, which was to forget Te Ao Māori and work hard and educate his kids in a Western worldview education. The underpinning philosophy to their worldviews was colonisation, as Māori were viewed the subordinate class. The discrepancies in the Treaty of Waitangi, especially Article 2, where the full exclusive rights for Māori to their lands and estates, forests, fisheries and other properties were not followed through. Hence why I believe the treatment of my granddad was just in the eyes of his bosses. Although my granddad had assimilated to the Tauiwi worldview, his Te Ao Māori wasn't lost. He just chose when to select in his knowledge and practice, as he utilised Papatūānuku and the environment to survive. He also reactivated his Te Ao Māori worldview when he reclaimed his mana motuhake self-determination in obtaining ownership of his home. The philosophies and principles that underpin this worldview is tikanga, as everything is intrinsically linked in Te Ao Māori, resulting in my granddad choosing wisely when to select in Te Ao Māori knowledge and practice. Ultimately, the principle of tino rangatiratanga, absolute integrity, influenced his worldview, as he seen his actions in obtaining ownership of his home as justice for all the years of hard work he had given to Tauiwi, ultimately giving security to his whānau and their Māori order. As Pohatu 2003 says, when activated, Māori worldviews immediately place Māori thinking, knowledge and application at the centre of their processes when selecting in and selecting out knowledge and practice. This is activating of tino rangatiratanga, absolute integrity and context. Reflecting on my granddad and his boss's relationships, they did establish respectful ones as they recognised his value as a worker and respected him as a man. I found it interesting that although they had their worldviews on where my granddad belonged in society, they still respected him, along with my granddad when he would choose to place his Te Ao Māori at the centre, which proved that worldviews aren't stagnant. As Sayer 2009 states, sometimes our worldviews, both those characterising small and large communities and those we hold as individuals, are inconsistent. I also believe if everyone collectively embraced a counter-hegemonic worldview, tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhake, which is the opposite of Western worldviews, in the context of housing like my granddad did, then the housing situation at the moment would improve radically, as there is power in numbers. To conclude, reflecting on this kōnai ngā ao ngā tirohanga, I would have to say my granddad's mana motuhake has influenced my worldview on social work, biculturalism and practice in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as I believe having an awareness and understanding of knowledge in bicultural worldviews will benefit social work practice and society. As Mataria 1995 says, biculturalism wisdom is a profound sense of knowing two compassionate worlds and using the knowledge and principles of both for the betterment of society as a whole.
Hello, Richard. We're talking about housing in Aotearoa, New Zealand. For you, Richard, in the 1960s and 70s, was it important for you and your family that you owned your own home?
It was very important to me because it made you secure. A person that was just on a wage and didn't have any money, he didn't have to buy them, but he could get one of these government houses at a reasonable rent.
Mm-hmm. When you moved to Whitianga and you had starting a young family, where did your first house come from?
Well, I bought my mum and dad's house that they built in Whitianga, and they bought the section in 1944, and they built a house on it that housed the 8 of us kids and mum and dad for 1 year, which would have been about 1946, and then mum and dad moved back to the farm, and the kids stayed on there and got jobs in Whitianga.
For you, Richard, was it very important having your family secure in your own home?
Oh, it was very important, and it was quite a place for younger people to congregate there and mix with my family and mix with the visitors, and right on the waterfront.
Because you were a builder by trade, what was your belief about building affordable homes?
My firm's policy was neat but not elaborate. And we would try and get a house built that would suit the people for the minimum cost, and that was safe and reliable.
And did you believe as New Zealanders or people were entitled to affordable homes that were warm, dry, safe, and provided shelter for them?
In my book, that's the ideal, and it's about the minimum that you would require to get a safe environment that's warm and comfortable and safe.
Cool. Did you build many houses around Whitianga?
Or probably 100.
Yeah. What is your take on looking after the working man?
Well, in my book, the working man is really what makes everything, and certainly we've got to have bosses, but even more importantly, we've got to have the working men, because they're the ground roots people that start things off, and they're really doing the work. It's not only just the working building houses, but I look at hospitals in particular, all the hard work that the staff in hospitals go through, and are they getting a sufficient wage for them to live comfortably?
On renting and owning your own home, how did you feel the wage back then was compared to now?
Oh, well, it seems to me that you could probably get along quite comfortably 50 years ago, but now the wages haven't followed the cost of living, cost of building up to where it's affordable.
And would you say that that's the same to do with rents as well? Is that why the working man's struggling, because the living wage doesn't relate to the costs of renting as well?
No, well, that would be right, because the rents have gone up, and it's got beyond the financial capabilities of the working man. His wages is just not enough. I believe they should be getting $20 an hour. And
how would you propose to sort of solve that problem?
By putting it up to $20 an hour, and there'd be lots of screams from the small businesses where they couldn't actually afford that big increase of wages going out, but the opportunity is there for the governments to be able to subsidise them so they can afford to give the working man a working wage.
Do you think there's enough jobs though, Richard?
Perhaps there is not in Whitianga, but there's jobs around the country that need promoting, and if they've got the staff and the staff are willing to work, it creates jobs.
What does a home, in your view, mean to you, having a home?
It's where you make your nest, and it's where you start your work from, where you have your friends round, and it's really the start. And especially if you've got a family, it's a family home.
What do you now see, Richard, as the benefits of owning your own home and affordable housing?
There's a certain amount of satisfaction and pride of ownership, and if you've got your own home, you keep the grounds looking nice, you keep your house looking nice, both inside and outside. And if you've got children, they're proud of bringing friends back to your home. And all those little things add up to make it something special.
Okay, Richard. Do you think that it was important for your community to have affordable homes?
Oh, it's absolutely essential. And if they're not affordable homes, how can the working man survive?
That's true. And in your view, Richard, what did it mean for you to live in an affordable house?
Well, I've always lived in an affordable house, and I can see no reason why other people shouldn't be able to enjoy the same privileges.
Thank you. My dad's family home in Kuaotunu on the Coromandel Peninsula is where he and his 8 siblings started their journey. Our 7th generation will also grow up here knowing this is their family home. Family and community is extremely important to Dad, and bringing people together to share and to care at our home examples this. A house or a home represents an environment in which positive relationships, not only within family but community, can be nurtured within a secure, warm and safe space. The Human Rights Commission 2010 states of economic, social and cultural rights, the right to housing states, everyone has the right to live in security, peace and dignity. This links directly to health, education and well-being. The New Zealand dream of aspiring to have your own home, advocated by government policy from 1906, Ferguson 1994, was a reflection of this. It was seen as material utopia. Cheap finance to realise this dream was offered to people deemed worthy. Ferguson refers to the chosen as being the more affluent, skilled or semi-skilled and respectable workers and their families. Others, less capable, were able to rent state homes built under this policy. This approach was based on the family home being a reward for those that worked hard. I believe it privileged the European post-colonisation as it was premised by a Western world view of the then government of their ideal family and whom, in their perspective, was worthy. Critique 2002 makes the comparison of culture to worldviews as every culture is a network of dominant worldviews or paradigms. These guide our social living and indeed make it possible. Western Christian theology upholds a hard day's graft will be rewarded in time, and this is reflected by our family's crest, tandem implebeur, and time come fulfillment. Dad's belief of everyone that works hard deserves this privilege and in fact has a right to it, upholds his kaumātua, elder and kaitiaki roles in taking care of the people and environment. He has demonstrated this well in the way he has provided houses, building and renting safe, durable, warm and affordable homes. Our longest standing renter of 14 years, Chris Lee, never had his rent increased. Core competency of competence to promote the principle of human rights and social and economic justice, Social Workers Registration Board 2015, I think aligns with this. My dad has a special connection and huge respect for wood. In his trade of building affordable homes for our community, he utilised minimal resources, though ensuring secure, safe, warm environments for the people. I'm a woodman, he told me, February 2016. This connection with Tane Mahuta, god of the forest, led to our visit in February 2016 to Muirwood, San Francisco, his quest being to pay homage to one of the last standing forests of redwoods worldwide. Taha Wairua, according to Jury 1994 and Royale 2010, comprises an interconnectedness of relationship between human and environment, linked via whakapapa genealogy. Jury 1994 suggests Taha Wairua for Māori is commonly felt as the most vital component for health. Without a spiritual awareness and a Maori spirit or vitality, sometimes called the life force, an individual cannot be healthy. Rangimarie, peacefulness surrounds as we deeply breathe and tune in. Cool, clear waters trickle away with our woes as we trod carefully upon Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother's sacred breast. Tall trees envelope us in their protection, nurturing with their shelter. Arms raised to Ranganui, the sky father, Ngāhere, the forest canopy parting. Energies of mahana, warmth, closeness, intimacy, renews, permeating our very beings. Connected in this moment, in relationship, Ngāhere, my dad, and I.
I'm Mark Leaborn, and I'm here with Dave Stevens. Dave is your atypical good old Kiwi bloke who loves having a beer with his mates while watching the All Blacks. Dave is a next generation New Zealander. He is a homeowner and paying off his mortgage. Dave is married and both he and his wife work full time. They have 2 children, both in primary school. Dave has kindly agreed to share his thoughts on home ownership in New Zealand, including his thoughts on the next generation of home owners. Dave, thanks for coming here today. Tell me, do you think home ownership in New Zealand is important, and why?
Of course it's important. It makes us feel good, like we belong to the country. Māori call it tūranga waiwai. You know, your place is standing. They should know. They owned the whole country once. Yeah, but that bloody treaty stuffed all that up, didn't it? You know, my missus reckons that John Key's fella, he got a whole lot of tūranga waiwai. She reckons he's got so much tūranga waiwai he's forgotten where he come from. Yeah, but what do we know, eh? Yeah, but owning your own home, well, it feels good to dig a garden or to own a dog and not have to ask your landlord. And it gives your kids something when you croak it too. And God knows they're going to need it.
So tell me, how do you think the next generation of New Zealanders will fare buying their first Kiwi home?
A house in Arataki costs $500,000. You need a deposit of $100,000, mate. We don't have enough houses in New Zealand to house Kiwi families, and that John Key fella keeps letting more migrants into our country. He reckons it makes good business sense while Kiwi families live in their cars, mate. That fella Statistics New Zealand was talking to his mate Census. He reckons home ownership in New Zealand is on the decline, mate. Read that.
So why do you think buying your first home in Aotearoa has become so difficult?
Simple, Mark. Firstly, if there ain't enough houses to house New Zealanders, don't let anyone else in. Kiwi families come first. Secondly, wages in Aotearoa are lousy. There's this fella did an independent study. He reckons the living wage is $19.40. Most of us are paid under that. House deposits are out of reach for even middle income earners now. Politicians can make a difference, Mark, but they're not. They have the means to get Kiwi families into their first homes. But what do we get, eh? A bloody flag referendum that cost $24 million and a panda.
So do you think our lifestyles are impacting on our ability to save for our first home?
My mother grew up with 14 siblings. Her dad worked in the pub. They survived on a single income. They had state assistance to buy their first home. The missus and I saved deposit for our first home when we were young. You could do that back then. We have no assistance from the state. We sacrifice our social lives for our kids' education and sports. We grow our own veggies. We hardly go out. There just isn't the spare money that there used to be.
Well, thanks for your time today, Dave Stevens, and tell me finally, what message would you give the government in regards to our children and home ownership?
I would say, start giving a rat's, mate. Our kids are all our responsibility. It is no longer the very poor doing it hard. It is the majority of New Zealanders really struggling to live in this country. And you have the power to change this. Make this a better place for Kiwi families. Let our children know the feeling and pride of home ownership, because you owe them that. You can make a difference, and you don't have to change the bloody flag to do it, mate.
During this interview, Dave Stevens' principal positioning represented the middle-aged Generation X New Zealanders, born between the 60s and the 80s. This generation grew up seeing their parents helped into housing by the state via low interest rates, low deposits, available land, quality low-cost housing, and governmental assistance through Housing Corp. Their parents could also opt out of the then family benefit scheme, and the state would provide the deposit for a mortgage. The Māori Affairs also had a rent-to-buy scheme which helped many Māori families into their first home. Generation X, however, did not experience that state help into home ownership, but instead needed to fund their own way into their first home. However, wages were more in line with inflation, and the ability to save was made better by those willing to go without to save, helping that generation onto the property ladder. Generation X now has a good vantage point on which to project their learned worldview from the parents to their children. Those of Generation X who possess a social conscience now fear for the welfare of their children and their grandchildren's future in the depleting hopes of purchasing their first home in Aotearoa. This is the generation who has seen the development of societal change, where our communities have moved from one of social conscience and communal thinking to cold, individual, material structured philosophies, influenced by governmental change and social policy, to corporate influence models where financial thinking overrides the welfare and collective care of a country's people. Dave Stephens is the kaitiaki of our tamariki. His focus or kaupapa in life is purely on the welfare of our children. On reflection and analysis of his kaupapa, Dave unwittingly practices Ngā Takapu theoretical positioning techniques, and in particular Māori ora. Dave believes that home ownership for our future generations is a right, but is fast becoming that elusive, unreachable dream. Put simply, there is not enough love in the thinking of today's leaders. And I leave you with this. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Nelson Mandela, Māori ora.
Ka inoi tātou. Kia tātou katoa. Te atawhai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, āmine.